Sweet. All right. Hey, Zars.
What's up, team? How are you guys?
Fantastic. We are great.
Mega.
Hold on, let me just go back one sec. Oh no, this will be quite fine. I'll keep it here. Alrighty, sweet. Might as well rip in. I've got Bakey behind. He's going to be filming this end, and this will film here, and then.
Hey, bro.
And
Whatever.
then we'll chop it up after, and we'll put it together for YouTube. But you good to go?
Cool. Good to go. Let's get it.
Rock on.
Is the volume on there cranked up as much as possible? Because I'm thinking I might try to catch
it in there.
And then that's worry about.
Done. Lincoln. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Sweet. Alrighty.
Well, you guys ready?
Cool. Alrighty, guys. Welcome to the Phyba Performance Podcast. This is episode 35, and today we have the privilege of chatting with Taylor Ryan, sports dietitian, who helps pretty much all the best athletes, especially in the CrossFit space, make it to regionals, make it to the games, but also helps a lot of other people in between with her amazing app, Bite Right. And we also have our co-host on here as well, which is Zavi Donabedian, who's the absolute mastermind behind all of our comms with Phyba. He pretty much does everything from start to finish, pretty much a jack of all trades. So today we're going to be talking about fueling right for performance, and then what that also looks like for females in particular, and then also the difference between fueling for performance and then fueling for longevity, and how we would discern what those two are. So welcome, Taylor.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
So just to start, just for the viewers who may not know, we might have some viewers that may know you, may not know you. So give us a little bit of background on who Taylor is and how you got into dietetics.
So I've been doing dietetics now for roughly 9 years. And it started because I used to be a CrossFit coach. So I was a CrossFit coach about 5 to 6 years, and then was doing my degree whilst I was doing that, and competing in weightlifting, even though I wasn't the best at it. But
That's
but
cool.
I
didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's mega.
Yeah.
What are your totals? What were your totals?
Oh, fuck. Not in competition, because I was shit when I competed.
Yeah.
It was like a 70 snatch and like a 90 clean and jerk.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Not on the platform. On the
Yeah.
platform, it all went to shit.
Yeah.
So-
That's okay. Me too.
Yeah.
I can give you a funny story about that, but yeah. Cool. So yeah, continue.
Yeah. So, and then I obviously was competing in weightlifting, having to make weight, and I saw my own sports dietitian whilst I was doing dietetics. That pretty much stemmed where I was, I guess, in terms of strength and conditioning, and that fueled my passion to then, help individuals within CrossFit as well as making weight. And then that stemmed into this. So
Sweet. That's so good. And so from the very beginning, like what got you passionate about fueling for performance on getting into dietetics? I guess was it something that from a young age, or interested in nutrition? Were you interested in cooking, or was it like the fueling thing, or did you notice a big difference when you fueled correctly? Is that what kind of got you interested?
So definitely not cooking, because I suck at presentation. I actually hate cooking,
Yep.
ironically. But it stemmed from high school, because I actually wanted to do exercise physiology initially. Yep. So, and I was always interested in, I guess, fueling for when I used to do states and that sort of stuff as running, because my actual background, unfortunately, so much I don't want to admit it, is running.
Yeah.
And then from there, when I went to the CrossFit scene, and I did and this is nothing against CrossFit by any means, but when I did my level 1, it was heavy on zone diet and paleo. So, and very excluding a lot of food groups and that sort of stuff. And then when I started actually practicing, I started seeing all these CrossFitters from recreational even through to the elite guys, as you'd know, underfueling and fear mongering in terms of having wholesome foods, which is great, but their energy demands for what they do for a sport was obviously quite high. And they just weren't feeling enough. So that you see this breakdown. You see a lot of females like a period, and the stigma saying, well, if I don't want to have children, it doesn't matter. I'm still lean. That's all that matters, in their words. And then obviously that led me to then go into the CrossFit scene a little bit more, with all these elite guys having the same problems. And that stemmed my passion for it, because people have this, misunderstanding when it comes to carbohydrates, misunderstanding with their goals, and then obviously what that means from a performance factor. And I know that sounds silly, but when you actually ask someone what their goal is, they don't even know. Like in terms of, is it performing or is it aesthetics? Because most of the time they're like, oh, I want to run a marathon, or I want to compete at Torian. But the underlying issue is like, no, they just want to stay jacked and lean. But those two can't really go hand in hand. Yeah. At some point, someone has to choose. So that's pretty much what stemmed my whole business.
Yeah. And Zavi, you could probably speak to this as well, coming from a background in kind of growing up, with a bit of a hippie family, like as you said in the previous podcast, and then going through a bit of your own journey. So Zavi, if you probably haven't listened to the last podcast we did, but Zavi actually went on fat camp So tell us a little bit about that,
Yeah.
Javi, a bit of your experience there.
Sure. Yeah. Talk about under fueling. I mean, when you're 13 and you're eating 1,200 calories and 10 grams of fat a day, and you're expected to maintain that for years at a time, that company actually got sued. So that's a fun story.
Yeah, I was in
It resulted in rapid weight loss, but it's completely unsustainable. And it's funny you mentioned kind of the L1 teaching around nutrition, because a lot of the functional medicine training that I did was heavily paleo. And we had a lot of, handouts and such that I would give clients. And over the years looking at them, I thought, this is bullshit. It doesn't really make that much sense for somebody who's as physically active as a CrossFitter. Again, paleo, for those who don't know, it's avoid grains, avoid sugar, pretty much stick to either animal or plant-based proteins, starchy tubers, vegetables. That's kind of it, really strict, bare bones. So Taylor, in your experience of working with people in that space, where would you say the disconnect is between fueling for performance and then just, adopting what they think is a healthy approach to nutrition?
I think people have difficulties understanding, which is my phrase that I speak a lot to individuals, is fueling adequately and healthy eating aren't mutually exclusive. So what is healthy with someone is going to be different to someone else. And then when you compare yourself to these elite guys, and even intermediate to elite, a lot of them are eating as if they're the healthy guidelines, paleo approach, which majority of the time, 80% of our diet should be that. Okay, I'm not saying, that you should be eating sugar and all that sort of stuff. But what I'm saying is even athletes have a misunderstanding of what it means to fuel and adequate fuel for the sport they're doing. And this is where that disconnect is understanding, I guess, exercise physiology and actually truly understanding your sport. Because if you understood your sport and the demographic, the energy systems and everything required with it, you'd understand that CrossFit is high intensity, right? So regardless of, your performance and your background, the more intense that gets or the more efficient you get at that sport and you want to do well with it, then you definitely need to fuel yourself more from that, I guess, more ultra processed carbohydrates, because you simply cannot eat enough for the demands of training that you're doing. And that's when we start to see that underfuel and that disconnect, because you'll have elite athletes trying to eat, 600-700 grams of carbs a day and coming from rice, sweet potato, oats, legumes, lentils, those types of things, which are still good quality food, but they then run the risk of being underfueled because they're so full and have so much fiber that they're not actually going to be able to give the intensity that they require, because they don't have enough of the carbohydrates broken down quickly and efficiently enough for their 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of training.
Yeah, and I'm definitely can put my hand up and say, yeah, that's me, because I'll go into most of my sessions over the course of my career and go, yeah, I felt pretty good. And I would have sessions where I did really, really well, and that session may have just suited what I ate prior to that. But I think I constantly ran the risk of being underfueled for so long that I just actually don't know what properly fueled feels like.
Yeah.
So you might be like, yeah, no, I've done okay the last 4 or 5 years doing what I'm doing. But when you want to compete at your best, it's like, well, how much stronger and how much more confident could I have felt if, I'd carved the way I should have done, fueled the correct way I should have done. And then, instead of getting under the 150 kilo bar to jerk it and feeling weak and out of place or not ready, what does that do to my confidence? Whereas if I gotten under 160, was super fueled, feeling super good, how much more confident I would have felt going onto the platform and starting at 10 kilos heavier and then placing 5 positions better and then qualifying 2 years earlier and then doing better at the event. It's a compounding effect. And whether you believe it or not, I think you're spot on when you say you need to understand your sport, what the demands are for the sport, and then link that with what the science is telling us in the nutrition. It's like, okay, if you're a heavy bike, let's say bobsled, for instance, which is literally sprinting for 30 meters and then sitting in bobsled, you need to make sure that you have the ability and working that energy system to sprint as hard as you possibly can, like a 60-meter sprinter or a 100-meter sprinter, whereas slightly different for a CrossFitter and then very different again for a triathlete or a marathon runner. But I think where we kind of sit in this is, for the most part, most of the viewers are going to be in the realm of probably triathlon, probably high rocks, probably CrossFit, and you need to get in the carbs. I was listening to a podcast the other day with Jan Frodeno, and he was trying to pump out, I think it was like 10,000 calories it was 15,000 calories before his Ironman race the day before. 15,000 calories. And it was like, I don't know, some ungodly number of carbohydrates. And he said, it was a mission to get it done, and he had to be so precise, but he was the best in the world for so many years. But he was eating like an extraordinary amount, but you're working out at, for him, pretty high intensity for 7 hours.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think it's important for people to understand too, like when you look at that aspect from, athletes and recreational through to the elite, a lot of people say, like, they'll look at you for an elite athlete and be like, oh, that's healthy. I'm like, there's nothing healthy about being an elite. They have extremes of their health. Do you know what I mean? So it's getting people to understand that, we're not advocating for people to eat sugar. We're not advocating that you should be majority of your diet. But when you simply have that many carbohydrate requirements, like coming into the games, you'll be needing to consume about 1,000 grams of carbohydrates. So when it comes to, fueling yourself with that, majority of that will be good quality, but then it needs to be more of that shitty carbohydrates and more ultra processed, because you simply can't eat that much.
You've got to get it in. And I think that's what people probably misinterpret. It's like you have to get it in for this period of time, and like you're probably not going to be at the absolute number one level any more than, say, 10 years. And if you are, you're a freak of nature.
Yeah.
And I think that period of time is where you can go, okay, cool, well, I'm going to get it from like 80% from whole food and the stuff that comes with all the other micronutrients. But at the end of the day, that extra 20% of carbohydrates that you either are just not having because it's not whole food is where you're going to lack in your last 2 workouts of the weekend.
Yeah, 100%.
And when you start eating, I remember I just remember this so vividly. I remember Tia used to say to me all the time, this is like through 2018, 2019, she was just like, I'm eating on like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for Sunday's competition. I don't feel like I need it right now. I can get through 2 days of competition probably underfueled, and I can just make it happen and still be good. But I'm eating for that Saturday night, that Sunday all day. And anyone who doesn't do that, you can see it in their face and the way that they handle themselves. They're just underfueled, feeling lethargic and not ready.
And you can see that's why she's the elite, right? So like people, and you can usually see in the CrossFit Games, day two or three, by the end of it, you can be like, you're underfueled because you didn't eat enough. Like because people, you ask a CrossFit athlete or any athlete in general what performance means to them, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be solely training, and that's it. But to me, I'm like, okay, you are already not going to be as elite as you can be, because you can't identify that performance is nutrition, mindset, and training. If you don't have all 3 of them, then you're never going to be the elite of the elite, because those guys have everything nailed down to the T. Like there is no way you can tell me that a CrossFit athlete at the elite level is sitting there eating 500 grams of rice after dinner after competing. There's no fucking way.
Yeah.
Because then you run the risk of being underfueled. If I said to you, okay, James, you can have 300 grams of rice and here's a can of Coke and, here's some cereal. And even Matt Fraser, when he was the elite as well, he, on his podcast that he did ages ago, he was eating Mars bars, he was eating Gatorade, because he knew to be the elite, that's what it was. Is it healthy? It's healthy for them at that point in time.
Yeah.
The moment you stop becoming an elite athlete, that is not healthy for you. You need to pull back.
I can't agree more. And
Yeah.
I think this is probably the first point you mentioned, is figuring out what your goals are.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what are your goals? Like, what do you want to achieve? Do you want to be the best in the world, or do you want like a super lean physique and do you want to live until you're 100?
Yeah.
Like, what's the thing here? And that can change over time. Like for right now, it's like, okay, I want to compete the best I possibly can in 5 weeks' time at the CrossFit Games. And that might look slightly different to what it looks like if I just want to make sure I can still, surf when I'm 80 years old. It might be 2 slightly different things. What are your thoughts on that, Zavs? Like, what in your experience there?
I would say one thing that I would love Taylor to speak to is that most people coming into this space don't understand the concept of timing either. It's not just about slugging Gatorade at some point during the day, or like scarfing down a few Mars bars at some point after a hard workout. Taylor, can you speak to the timing of those carbohydrates and why that's important for performance, not just consuming them in general?
Yeah, so I guess the reason why we go on about more of those ultra processed carbohydrates is they act as a fuel source to your muscles, right? So you want to have them in and around training, because that's when your body will utilize that. So when people go on about, these types of carbohydrates make me gain weight, blah, 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 it's not carbohydrates that make you gain fat, it's excess calories, right? So if you're eating those foods and you don't have the intensity to match those carbohydrates, of course you're going to gain weight, right? It makes sense. But those carbs in and around your training is what's going to give your muscles the abundance to be able to push harder, if that makes sense. So carbohydrates aren't actually needed for us to survive, ironically, but that's the same as saying we don't need sunscreen, but you're a dumbass if you don't wear it, right? So it's the same with nutrition in terms of our carbs, is that you position them in and around training, depending on how long that is. So obviously the more processed they are will be dependent on how long you are training for, and the degree of your intensity. So for example, most people who are just an everyday athlete don't necessarily need to be having Mars bars and that sort of stuff. If they're not having their 2 serves of fruit a day, I'm like, mate, you need to meet your foundations of your nutrition before you go into more of those ultra processed foods. That's not me saying you can't have Mars bars or LCMs or anything like that, but let's tick those boxes, because if you are a person whose diet is shit outside of your pre-training nutrition, don't worry about your pre-training nutrition. That's 1%. Work on your foundations of your nutrition first, tick those boxes. And once you have that sorted, then your pre-training nutrition can come in, and that's when you focus on those carbohydrates. But essentially those more ultra processes around about, 30 to 45 minutes prior to your training sessions. So then they're broken down quickly and then utilized for that workout, or fueling yourself for the workout ahead is essentially like my, slogan that you can say. And then the longer you train, or the more you train in the day, the more of those ultra processed carbs will need to be partitioned in and around those training sessions to help your body get the best out of that, session itself, whether it's performance, timing, that type of thing as well. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, definitely.
I noticed
as a follow-up, if I could just chime on this, I'm curious, because in that kind of paleo holistic space, there are some folks out there who are mega fans of a ketogenic approach to dieting. And I would love to hear your thoughts. Is it possible to compete at an elite level with a ketogenic approach to nutrition? Because I'm just curious. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
What have we got? Because I can be.
Yeah, we got all day.
And this is not in a derogative way by any means. I tend to get it ripped on by most of the Americans with this, because obviously the Americans, it's such a bigger population, and that's a big thing over there. But again, it comes down to your goal and understanding what we're trying to achieve. So when we do a ketogenic diet, I always say to people, unless you're epileptic, why are you doing the ketogenic diet? That's the whole reason why it was created. It was created to try and minimize, sugars, because obviously reduces the risk of seizures. The brain still needs obviously carbohydrates, so eliminating those carbs eliminates the risk of seizures. So first and foremost, that's what I usually ask people. Secondly, the sport. So it comes down to understanding the basic physiological aspect of exercise physiology. If your sport is something that is above 65-70% of your maximal heart rate for a long duration of time, our body's preferred fuel source as intensity increases is always going to be carbohydrates. It's never one in isolation, right? We have, when you are training, it's at high intensity, it's carbohydrates, fats will come in and use a little bit, but majority of the time our body's going to be using carbs to fuel that training session or workout. So when you're an elite guy, elite athlete, and I say to you, they're like, oh, I use carbohydrates. I'm like, at some point you are going to break down. And I can tell you now, the top CrossFitters and most of the top athletes in the world of any sport that's high intensity, they're not doing ketogenic diets. So just let that sink in.
For sure.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that's probably a point that I'd like to bring up here for people that are just, fresh to the energy systems, fresh to what fuel sources fuel those energy systems. There's never one working by itself. You've got one that's working predominantly. You've got one, let's just give it a number. You've got, say, one that's working at 50%. You've got another one that's working at like 5%. And then you've got another one that's working at like whatever's left, 35, 45%. So just keep that in mind, that you're always going to be utilizing some form of fat, some form of carbohydrate, and some form of creatine phosphate. But those ratios will fluctuate as the exercise progresses and moves around the circle. Like if you take off for a 400-meter sprint, for that first, 8 to 10 seconds, CP system's probably predominant. Then you start to move into that anaerobic phase, and then you start to move in. The longer you run, You're probably not going to really hit aerobic by the time you finish that. But if it was long run, then you'll start to hit it.
And I think that's really important, again, when people are like, ketogenic diets and elite athletes. I'm like, if you understand your sport, you would not be doing ketogenic whatsoever. And ketogenic diet is more so focusing on weight loss opposed to fat loss and performance. Those again are separate aspects altogether. So a lot of people spruik and be like, well, it's amazing for me. I was like, cool, but this is science, and science doesn't care about your feelings. So at the end of the day, we still know that these elite guys are still elite for a reason. Predominantly most of the time, we even look at the Ironman, they're using Coke, they're using Cliff Bars, they're using sugar, all this sort of shit during their long events. It's not nut butter. It's not a fucking bulletproof coffee.
Yeah.
I mean, no one cares. So
and I think that's probably where the misconception, and Zabi, you would know this being from the Bay Area. But I think,
sure.
I think the idea of the ketogenic diet, the MCT oil in your coffee and all that stuff, I think it had this really good marketing tool where it told people, the people that were talking about it in the area were saying brain performance. It's like, you're using ketones, and your brain uses ketones. And if you want a high performing brain, you're going to need to be on the ketogenic diet. And then it slowly trickled down into, if you want to perform, you can use the ketogenic diet. So it's like, hey, they're two totally different things. Hey, that first thing might not even be not even be a thing, you know?
And it's getting them to understand, again, what performance means. And a true ketogenic diet is 50 grams of carbs and lower.
Wow.
So when you're actually doing it from a CrossFit perspective, that just doesn't even make sense. Like, you don't even need to be that switched on to put that into theory. I think that's where people get like really important to understand. And from me, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with ketogenic diet. If it works for you, that's fine, completely fine. I'm not slamming it from that perspective, but I am slamming it when it comes to elite athletes, because it's this type of derogative nature around dieting in terms of what ends up people being underfueled, eating disorders, disordered eating. You know, that's the pattern that I'm coming across, as well as getting you guys to understand that no one should be spruiking it in terms of the elite level in general for it being this magical diet, because it's not a magical diet. It's just a diet. Whether you want to do paleo, fucking keto, fasting, don't get me started on that. But doing like that perspective, if it works for you, it works for you. But to be the elite and to fuel yourself, carbohydrates need to be present in your diet.
And if you look at the OG of OGs, like Rich Froning, if you look back at some of his old school videos of him just slamming down jam, like strawberry jam with a bit of peanut butter, like he would make up that thing. And then literally every man and his dog would have this Tupperware container a mix of PB&J. It was like crazy, just like, and again, it was just a bit of fat and tons of carbs and really just easy to digest carbohydrate, just jam essentially.
And it's a good combo.
Yeah, and just put it together and you get some fuel there. And he wouldn't eat that as a meal, right? But he would have that pre-training, during training, and some after training. And then in and around that, I think from memory, he had like a protein shake before and after with like, I don't know, 500 or 600 mils of milk.
Yeah.
That's what he was doing. And again, at the end of the day, I think the idea that we need to probably emphasize here is that when you're prepping for a high intensity competition, which is back-to-back workouts, not so much for, I guess if you're doing high rocks, you're doing multiple events, but you need to be fueling correctly. You need to be getting the carbs in, and you shouldn't be fear-mongering the carbohydrate intake. I think that's the key, because a lot of people see the CrossFit Games athletes and they're super jacked and super lean. It's like, cool, I need to get super jacked and super lean. But it's probably a misconception when you're trying to perform at your best. The only reason, that's the byproduct.
Yeah.
But a lot of them have, you know, look at Brent Fikowski, he's doing 1,000 to 1,100 grams of carbohydrates a day. It's like a lot, but you can get there if your training is on point as well.
Yeah.
So could you speak a little bit about how you would approach, say, an elite male versus an elite female in terms of what you would try and nurture the most? Are they different? Are they the same?
So I guess it'll come down to, like with the females, we've got to pay attention to, I guess, overall output as well. But with females, obviously, we have the menstrual cycle. Now, there's not a lot of evidence to suggest how we should approach that from a nutritional standpoint or a training standpoint at the moment, because we're in the early, I guess, infancy of that. In saying that, though, from a female perspective, majority of the time we are seeing a lot of that underfueling. I'm not saying it's not present in the male area as well, but is very heavily dominated within the female industry. But female population, I guess it's more associated with the fact because we have this, you have to achieve a certain body composition. Like you could see Laura
Horvath.
Yep. You know, a lot of people commented on her being like her body composition wasn't leanest, but she won, and vice versa. And it's really getting you guys to understand that your body composition doesn't determine your performance. It can be a factor, but if you're the leanest on the field, doesn't mean you're going to be the strongest. Just like if you're the strongest on the field, doesn't mean you're going to be the most adaptive. So from a female perspective, is getting them to understand, A, first and foremost, they're eating enough for overall calories, because the majority of the time female athletes aren't. They are underfueling. B, is it that you are an individual who is coming into that time of month from a menstruation perspective and you notice changes. You need to apply those changes to yourself, whether that's increasing carbs coming into your period because you notice an increase in hunger, or you notice, for example, that your training isn't the best coming into it. As long as they're individualized approaches to yourself. What pisses me off more at the moment in this health industry is people jumping on the bandwagon, and it's a marketing scheme because the evidence isn't there. Basically saying you need to only do Pilates or pull back on your training, and you need to make sure that you don't have too many carbs around, your follicular or luteal phase, whatever the fuck it is. And it's getting them to understand that if it's applicable to you, then that's okay. If it's not, we don't want to be creating this mindset that already set females up to undermine themselves. And we see it a lot because, coming into your menstrual cycle, yes, you tend to hold a little bit more fluid. Potentially, if that's something that you notice, you have an increase in hunger because there is a slight increase in energy demands because obviously the menstrual cycle itself is an inflammatory process, which means your body has to go through that with a slight increase in requirements. But that doesn't mean that it's applicable to everyone.
Sure.
So I think when you're looking from a male and female perspective, from a female perspective, like I said, overall calories, paying attention to that menstrual cycle, that is something that you are noticing in and around your training sessions, and then making sure, I guess, overall from that recovery perspective. But from a male perspective too, I guess it's just, and then fat mass and, lean mass and that sort of stuff as well is something to pay attention to. But from a male perspective, again, you guys are at the risk of underfueling significantly. It's harder to identify with males because you guys don't have a menstrual cycle. So if you are underfueled, sometimes with females, what we do see is your menstrual cycle can be lost. Not all the time, but with males, obviously you don't have that. So it is harder to identify underfueling. Yeah, and that's a big thing because athletes will train for 6 or 7 hours a day, elite levels, and
typically not complain, and then they'll say, "Oh, I'm actually feeling like shit." You just don't want to admit that you feel terrible, or you feel like you can't sleep, or you're probably not. You don't want to put yourself out there as being somewhat weak, and you're just like, I'm just tired. I'll keep it to myself.
Yeah.
But I think if you were to really dig into it and actually be open about how you're actually feeling, you might be like, okay, well, I don't feel great. What can I look at my last previous days of eating? Have I hit my calorie requirements? Like, how much load have I put through my body? What else have I been doing during the day? Been working really hard. Has my sleep been off? Blah, 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 blah. I think if we were to dig into that, people would probably see an extra 10. I know for myself, probably 10, 15, 20% better progress in training. Better, like, I wish I could kind of just like, I don't have any regrets, but I wish I could scoot back like 8 years and feel better leading into competition, because I'd be interested to see how it could go. But I think a lot of people are in the same boat. I never put as much emphasis on getting the carbs in. I remember when I was a kid doing little athletics, Dad used to be all about it, because that was like, back in the day, there was like, carb up the day before. There was like carb load. But again, when we first got into CrossFit, like 2011, 2012 era, that was like paleo, zone, keto, whatever it may be. And that was like a bit of a trend. So eating like massive amounts of carbohydrates right before your CrossFit workout was not really a thing. It kind of you were feared out of doing it because you just wanted to be jacked and lean and get through your workout. And hopefully the workout suited you enough that you could get through it with lack of carbs, just because you were good at particular movements, But I want to maybe just talk, just before we go on to a high rock space, what are some bare bone basic supplements that you think most athletes should potentially look at, like whether it's like iron or Bs or something like that? Like what is for an athlete, what are they probably most going to be lacking in?
So first and foremost, this is obviously not individualized advice, it's just generalized. But from a CrossFit perspective, you definitely want to be on creatine monohydrate. That is like the most evidence-based supplement to date. And that's beneficial for any sport that is like that intensity perspective, which is good. Beta-alanine, so if anyone doesn't know what that is, that's that itchiness, the one that gives you, mostly in pre-workouts. And the reason why we suggest that one is because it acts as reducing lactic acid. So it actually helps by reducing hydrogen ions, which is responsible for the buildup of lactic acid. So obviously in CrossFit, the sport, such if you're doing airdyne sprints or something, obviously that builds up quite quickly. So that is beneficial. Also too, if you are, caffeine is always one as well. Keep in mind with caffeine though, you become tolerant to it, so you don't want to rely too much on it. But, it has that benefit, perceived exertion, which is a good thing. And then I guess from there as well, if your diet is lacking in things like omega-3s, so you don't like a lot of fish or anything like that, is beneficial for that from an anti-inflammatory perspective. Protein powder, if you do like to utilize that as a supplementation on top of or helping you meet your quota for the day, is also a good thing. And then you can delve into like a little bit more specifics if, vitamin D. Again, individualized approach, make sure you get blood tests to assume that. If you are plant-based, there's an increased risk of deficiencies naturally, just because some of those dietary elements aren't in all plant-based options. That's when you want to be focusing on like your Bs and your irons, as you're aware too, and making sure that you have vegan versions of, your fish oils and that sort of stuff as well. So, and again, like one of the biggest things that I know this is hard to, I say to people all the time, is that if you are underfueled, your body can show you other ways. So nutritional deficiencies are a big thing. You can start to be iron deficient because you're overloading your body in terms of the amount of training that you're doing, particularly if it's a pounding type of training. So CrossFit, high rocks, running, all those types of things where your iron will start to break down as a compensating mechanism of not having enough during your intake. So that's why we can see runners, it's quite common, called foot strike hemolysis. I don't know if you ever heard that before. It's essentially when you get damaged red blood cells because you're low in iron, maybe because of your diet, or maybe just the fact that you are underfueled, so micronutrients start to become deficient. I'm rambling on here, but essentially,
continue, please.
Yes.
Great information.
So essentially, like, that's why when you are becoming, even if you are from recreational, intermediate to elite, any of those stages when you start to take your training seriously, it's important to try and get a blood test to see what's going on, because remember, underfueling, whether you're male or female, and then iron too with the menstrual cycle, because there's an increased risk of iron losses, is that you want to be, it's a cumulative effect. So it doesn't just happen. Underfueling isn't by one thing in isolation. So it's not by not eating carbs. It's usually overtraining, underfueling, and stress. But as an athlete, regardless of what stage you're at, that can be amplified, obviously. So hence why underfueling can look different on everyone. So I have athletes who have females who have had their period, stress fractures, iron deficiency, gut issues, being classified as underfueled. I have females who lose their period, slightly overweight, not the leanest, being classified as underfueled. So it doesn't discriminate, essentially.
Sure. That's so interesting. Okay, well, there's some like fun facts, but creatine, number one. I can definitely attest to that. Daily basis, every day, regardless of whether I'm training or not, I'll just have it regardless. One thing I want to touch on, and this is probably the biggest craze going around at the minute, and not a craze, I think it's actually going to be long lasting. I think some people think it'll be a craze and it'll be fleeting, but high rocks racing, which is like super, it's in the space, everyone's talking about it, everyone's doing it. I was at the race 2 weekends ago, and there were 7,000 races, and it's the second Melbourne race that we've had, but there's 7,000 races, and there are so many people in the space getting in and around, trying to go from the intermediate division to the pro division to the elite division. And I think we're going to see a lot more people reaching out about nutrition advice and how to fuel for their race and how to become better and better and better. If you were prepping someone, let's just say in the pro division, they're doing, let's say the elite division, and they're getting ready for roughly about an hour to an hour and 10, so a 70-minute race, what are some key concepts that you would try and instill in this person, whether it be carbing, getting ready for it, maybe some beat it shots, maybe some, some beet. So we'll talk about beetroot, and then maybe even from like a hydration standpoint, like what is going to be the best bang for buck for someone getting ready for a high rocks race to think about and have pre-prepared for that race?
Yeah. So first of all, the biggest thing you always want to trial, you never want to wing it with your carbohydrates coming into a competition. So where a lot of people go wrong is they might be having a low to moderate amount of carbohydrates in their everyday nutrition. And they're like, oh, I've got this competition coming up, I'm going to wing it, and I'm just going to eat whatever the fuck I want to eat my carb requirements. And then they wonder why they have like runner's gut, or pretty much shit themselves during the run. So never wing your nutrition coming into it. So always, when it comes to a high rocks competition or even CrossFit competition, particularly high rocks because there's a longer duration, is everything that you do, you want to trial 2 or 3 weeks prior throughout the, or even your prep of your high rocks competition, so you know what sits well in your gut. So between different, like when you're on the run, for example, your pre-workout nutrition that you've had for that is suitable for when you come back in and do the sled push or wall balls or anything like that, because the different modalities of the movements is what can affect people's guts. So never winging it, first and foremost, trialing all your pre-training nutrition, aiming for carb loading. So even though it's a different style in terms of it could be 1 or 2 events depending on what we're doing, whether you're doing relays or individuals, is like that hour, it tends to be more of a steady state, right? There's going to be times where you go into higher energy demands or intensities, particularly maybe on the run. But prior to that, you are still maintaining quite more of a steady state cardio perspective for that duration. So carb loading for that is going to be very important. If you said to me, what's a good carb loading for an individual? Anywhere between 6 grams to 10 grams per kilogram of body weight. So that is quite a lot of carbohydrates, even though it's only for that 1 hour. Because a lot of people forget when they're racing or competing, it's not just the carbs for that event, it's the nerves, it's the stress, it's the night before, it's all those other factors that naturally burn energy. You just being at the competition event will be burning more calories than you are just now, because of the fact that we're stressed, excitable, all those types of things, muscular contraction, all those aspects. So carbohydrate perspective, and then hydration is a big thing too, where a lot of athletes go wrong because they don't realize that hydration, our body's made up of 67% of water. So if you're not drinking normal hydration to meeting your requirements on a day-to-day basis, so put it in average, you need about 30 mils to 35 mils per kilogram of body weight per day. And then when you're doing an event like that, from a sweating perspective, you need to start paying attention. Okay, what's your sweat rate like? And this would be something, again, you'd be trialing prior to training. So if you're a heavy sweater, okay, when we sweat, we're not just losing water, we are losing a lot of our electrolytes at the same time. We do lose iron and that sort of stuff as well. So you do need to pay attention to the fact that you're coming in with some sort of hydration strategy prior, you've tested it, so then we know that you're coming into that, because you don't just want to be hydrated with fluid, just water, because you have the risk of hyponatremia, not having enough of those electrolyte replacements. So electrolytes in terms of sodium and carbohydrate requirement is a good combination during that event too. So it's an hour to an hour and a half, or depending on the level. You may find that you may hit a wall as well. So then obviously intra-carbohydrates, whether that's through some sort of sports drink, or I would do food or gels or something like that, to be able to get that down quicker, is also something that you need to factor into as well.
Yeah, I think there's going to be the intra workout, the intra nutrition for high rocks is going to become a little bit more prevalent. I noticed that because we've only done 3 races here in Australia thus far, but I've had a lot of questions already. It's like, were you eating during that race? And I didn't eat during the race. I was drinking electrolytes, but I think it would be advantageous to get either a gel in the pocket, just maybe one that has like 20 to 25 grams. You can find 25 grams of carbs during the race. I think would be advantageous, especially before you get back to the wall balls, because a lot of people are dying on the wall balls. And I know from experience doing like long Ironmans and half Ironmans and stuff, that the thing that got me through my races was making sure my nutrition was on point. And the races where I didn't make it a priority suffered. It was still the same fitness in both races, but the nutrition on the day leading up, the day before, and then during the race made probably a 30% difference in how I felt.
And I think it's important for people to understand this, a bit sciencey, but when you have your pre-workout nutrition, so that's fueling you for that workout ahead, usually for that like 45 to 60 minutes, right? So we predominantly want that to be carbohydrates. There's different transporters of carbohydrates, and most people will recognize sugar as glucose. So that gets broken down. Simple sugars, your body can utilize that really quickly. Now, our body can only use 1 gram every minute. So that means we're already capped at having 60 grams of carbohydrates in an hour is all we can absorb. If you start to have too much of that, then you can have gut issues and that sort of thing as well. So what we can do from the perspective, from an intra-training perspective, and then we also have one called fructose, which is in a lot of our fruit and that sort of stuff, dried fruit. Now, fructose takes longer to digest because it goes through a different pathway. Don't need to worry about that. That's essentially 0.5 grams per minute. So you've got maximum 30 grams in an hour, glucose 60 grams in an hour. Now, where a lot of people go wrong is they might, first and foremost, I definitely wouldn't be eating during a high rocks, because again, it's the fucking around with that. Liquid is easy to digest, gets in quickly to those working muscles. But what we want to do from that perspective is that something you can look at is paying attention to combining glucose and fructose together. So then we have a capacity of absorbing 90 grams or even higher. That's why when you look at people who have high energy demands or like Ironman and that sort of stuff, they're doing 120 grams per minute. I mean, that's obviously to extent of high rocks, but when we're paying attention to that, the type of, like for you, for electrolytes, we wouldn't just be doing electrolytes. We'd be doing some sort of glucose component that comes with that. So multidextrin, for example, is a good one. It's flavorless because, which helps, because sometimes if you notice when you're doing your running or triathlon background, your palate changes. And that's something that you might notice in a high rocks in the back end of it, or you crave more salt or sweet foods. But multidextrin is one of those ones that's easy on the gut, can be absorbed really effectively, and it's not so harsh either. So that's something you could be having in combination with electrolytes as well. But again, Gatorade, I'm not fucking sponsored by any of them, so please don't say anything. Gatorade, Stomach, whatever they are, the reason why a lot of people go for those is because, again, science is they're a little bit higher than the osmolality of our gut. So osmolality is our body concentration. So if you have too much of something, you'll get a stitch. So do you ever, when you're a kid and you have your cordial, and I want to have the really sweet cordial with hardly any water, and then you're like, I don't feel so well in my stomach because it has a high osmolality. Whereas Gatorade, Powerade, all of that tend to be a little bit higher than our gut, but can be easily absorbed. Hence why we have it. Most of the time, people don't have any issues in their gut, but their body can break down those carbs, utilize them there and then, and it's liquid, which means in a workout, particularly for wall balls, you can have that in between when you're resting.
Yeah, and I know, Zavi, you've actually probably experimented this in the past before using beetroot. Have you used that before, and how have you found?
Yeah, 100%. Well, when you grow up in the Bay Area and you're surrounded by hippies and everything is naturalist, then of course beetroot is like the number one go. Gatorade and Powerade. There's actually a thing in San Francisco for a long time. You couldn't have like name brand stores within the city itself. So you'd have to go outside of the Bay over the bridges to go to like a Target or a Walmart. Anyway, long story short, I grew up with the hippies, but beetroot 100% for the nitric oxide production feels fantastic. I think in terms of bioavailability, for me, it's great. Some people have like intolerance to beetroot, which I still don't understand. I just think they probably have a fucked up gut microbiome. But yeah, 100%, right? But yeah, I've had wonderful results with it. I know it shows up in our Super Browns powder, which we love. But overall, fantastic for, perfusion and delivery of some nutrients there, nitric oxide. I love it personally. But Taylor, why do people not always tolerate it?
So the reason that I'm getting too sciencey again, because I could go on a little like tangent with this, but it contains, I guess, FODMAPs. So if anyone's ever heard of FODMAPs before, they're type of carbohydrates or short chain carbohydrates that our body has issues sometimes with digesting, and therefrom as a result you can get intolerances or issues. Now they're not harmful by any means, it's just uncomfortable because you can get bloating, gas, pretty much feel like you want to shit yourself, that type of thing, depending on it. So things like, you probably heard of it when people are like, oh, I can't have mango, or I can't have some form of bread or that sort of stuff. That I'm gluten intolerant. Like, are you gluten intolerant or are you fructan intolerant, which is a type of FODMAP in bread? Do you know what I mean? But beetroot is one of those guys in terms of FODMAP. So if you have too much of it in one sitting, it can upset people's stomach. So for me, I don't tend to have issues with many FODMAPs, but I can't have red onion. So it's a type of FODMAP, and there's a tolerance to how much you can have. So I can only have a small amount every 1 or 2 days. If I have too much, and I start to get really bad pains in my stomach. And it's just until your body can digest that. So there's food examples, and like I said, beetroot is one of them. And the reason why beetroot is getting so much, traction in these types of sports, and you use it particularly in Tour de France and that sort of stuff as well, is it's naturally our body's natural version of EPO.
Yeah.
So what it does is beetroot, as you said, gets converted to nitric oxide and essentially creates a vasodilation of our blood vessels. So when we are exercising, most of the time it constricts, but then if we have some sort of supplement that comes in, it opens that up, which means we have more blood flow and more oxygen being delivered to the muscles. Now that's advantageous for a sport such as, well, most sports, but a longer duration sports, such as high rocks, running, CrossFit to a degree when they have a lot of the running WODs. So you guys will be doing that in Texas. The biggest thing you got to be mindful of beetroot though, is because for it to be advantageous, just like Gatorade, all that sort of stuff, it needs to be in a concentration form, because the amount that you need to get the benefits from a nitric oxide perspective, it's almost 900 mils. So it's almost a liter that you need to be consuming. And then not even that, the practicality of consuming a liter of beetroot juice, plus also the sugar content. It's like what type of carbohydrate makeup it is, gut irritability, FODMAPs. So now they've created a shot version, again, not sponsored by anyone, but they are called beet it shots, and they are the right concentration and the right amount that you require for it to be advantageous to get those beneficial results for that. So it is very interesting. It definitely 100% works. Most of my CrossFitters did it last year in the games and years before that with the running events. But you do honestly make such a difference with it. Yeah.
And I think not only from the perspective of during your event feeling like you've got just maybe another half a gear or another gear, knowing that you're a little bit more vasodilated, you've got a little bit more blood flow, a little bit more nutrients, a little bit more oxygen coming through the muscles, making you feel a bit better. Every rep is feeling like 0.5% easier. That's kind of the key. But also I think something to take into account here is that if you are doing these beat it shots and you've primed it and you're doing them before each event, you may be a little bit more vasodilated after and in between workouts, where you need those nutrients to be entering the muscles to help with recovery. So you're already starting to heighten slightly maybe your recovery ability for the end of the day or the end of the weekend's work. So it's not, I guess, just about an acute fix or an acute aid, but also, potentially a bit more of a chronic helping effect of, being a little bit more open and a bit more vasodilated constantly, if that makes sense. I think that's one thing that we were talking about a couple of years ago when probably around the 2016, 2017 era, I was having a chat with Brian McKenzie and Sean Kostuch about being more endurant for the games, because essentially the weekend is such a hard slog. It's like you can be all good and well to go in and smash your one workout on a day, but when you need the ability to back it up 3 times in a day, and then do it again the next day, and then do it again the next day, and then by the end of the weekend you've done 12 to 15 events, it's in it by most assessments, it's an endurance-based event that needs you to back up by, you still got 300 points on the line on Sunday.
Yeah.
So if you don't have some type of aerobic base to help you recover a bit better, you might be better on day 1 and day 2, but then go crumbling on day 3 and day 4. So I think for a lot of people that see CrossFit as a power output dominant sport, yes, you must have some type of aerobic base, and if it's not at a certain level, you're probably not going to make CrossFit Games.
I think it's gone are the days of being like the strong, like CrossFit has delved the way of their programming is. It used to be one RMs were the big things, but now you can start to see not saying there's a right build for CrossFit, but when you look at the efficiency of most of these elite athletes, they're not long levers. They're not, it's just about making sure that they have that endurance base, because that's where you see it. Yeah,
100%. And I think for the most part, you look at some outliers there, like the likes of Fikowski, the taller athletes that are doing super well. But then if you look at, the people that have, won the thing, it's, between 5'7", 5'9", roughly about 87 to 90 kilos. They're all kind of been in that realm. And for the females, it's been somewhat similar too. There's just been some outliers there that are just freaks of nature. But again, you're always going to get a freak of nature somewhere.
Yeah.
And the longer it goes on, the more they're going to show up. But yeah, that's been super interesting. Zab, do you have any final questions for Taylor?
Yeah, of course. Hey, does blending a banana increase its glycemic index?
It was what, sorry?
Does blending a banana increase its glycemic index?
About this, I'm just like, eat a banana how you fucking want to eat a banana. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so, I guess again, there's a lot more exposed to these types of what do we call nutrition fads than what we are.
They want to. It's. I think that because there's so many podcasts out there. New fact. It's like, hey, did you know that blending bananas with your blueberries totally eliminates any antioxidant value? You might as well not do it. I was like, oh my god, I've been missing out on all my antioxidants. Years.
Or then when people you can't have anything that's bad for you, then fibrous. I'm like, fuck, here we go.
That's fucked. But no, seriously though, for somebody who's just entering this space, so maybe they're not an elite athlete, they're not going to the CrossFit Games, but they want to lose a little bit of weight, they want to feel a little bit better, and they want to apply these principles. Why would it be beneficial to work with somebody like you? And B, what are some simple things they could start doing this week that would make a difference?
I think the biggest thing with anyone is that you always do your research, right? So we can get sold by anyone on social media. If I could make myself sound really enticing if I wanted to, and really sell you the keto diet if I actually wanted to. And then you don't need to look at my qualifications because it sounds so appealing, but personal bias at the end of the day it's not a thing, right? So I think important to understand where you want to go in terms of your goals, but also making sure that the person that you're getting that information from has some sort of qualifications. Now, I'm not saying all people who have qualifications are amazing, because there are some dickhead dietitians out there, just like there's some dickhead doctors out there. But again, it's about understanding that the ones that you go for, are they applying their own personal bias? Do you mean I have personal bias to things, but I don't apply that to any of my athletes or any of my individuals because it's just for me. Do you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, it's my personal bias doesn't matter. So it's really important to work with someone within that space and also within the scope of practice. So I only deal with CrossFit, strength and conditioning, hybrid athlete, I guess now. I don't necessarily deal with a lot of runners, not because I can't look after them, which is not where I've focused most of my work. So I will refer onwards. Do you know what I mean? So it's really understanding, that you're outsourcing the individual for the space that you're in. Because, I get slammed by a lot of, even some dietitians being like, I can't believe you recommend all this sugar to athletes. I'm like, A, don't put words in my mouth. B, it's only for a part of their diet. And C, fuck off. Do you know what I mean? So it's again,
right.
I ramble on about this is do your homework. Again, sports dietetics. So I've done at least 7 years of university to get where I am, and professional development is something you have to continue to do. So it's not just like you do your degree and that's it. I continuously learn as new peer-reviewed articles and everything comes out, because science does change. And then from there to making sure that you do have a good understanding of the basics of nutrition. Nutrition principles have not really changed. People just like to put their spin on it. We still want to make sure that we're having good quality carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, lean meats, vegetables, fruits, fiber, plant-based proteins, those types of things. And as you start to become more serious in your sport, that's when more of those ultra processed foods come in. Like even me, I'm not an elite athlete by any means, but I train 2.5 hours a day. And my diet does consist of, pikelets and jam. It consists of LCM bars, Gatorade, all of that in and around training to support my performance goals. Do you know what I mean? So it's getting you to understand when those types of carbohydrates are applicable, expand on your knowledge, and don't believe everything you have on you see on social media.
I love it.
100%. And, too, if you just assume that eating like Brent Frykowski is going to make you look like Brent Frykowski, you forget that it's very individualized, right? And that everybody is different. Everybody has a different inflammatory status and tolerance of different foods. And just honestly, an approach or a mindset to food, like you said, like their disordered eating is huge when it comes to this space, whether it's because of body composition or your own internal bullshit, right? So actually working with somebody can be incredibly helpful to figure that out for you, because otherwise you're just kind of shooting from the hip and shooting in the dark, right?
And I think a lot of people just want to be able to pick out something that they hear and then just rip on it. Like a lot of people will say, Brent Frykowski or Tia look like this. And like has a lot to do with their genetics. Do you mean like I could sit here and sell, if I had a six pack and say, oh, it's all for my diet, it's all this meal plan I've done, it's all this. I'm like, well, you've got to mention majority of it's genetics. Like, you can't fixate.
Right.
And that's what a lot of people get their confusion from, because they might say, Tia might say, this is what I eat in a day. And that's all it takes for someone to get an eating disorder or disordered eating, because they're like, well, I'm going to eat like her. Why don't I look like her? Because it's hard for them to understand the difference from that perspective. That's literally all it can take. So I think it's really important to understand that regardless whether you eat like James Newbury or Brent Frykowski, you'll never be the same. Ever.
Right.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I think that's pretty important. And the same thing goes for the training too. It's like I could sit here and I could bust out a 6-hour day of training, but is that going to be best for me at this point of my life? Probably not. I'll probably do way better off 2 hours of training. There was a point in time where 6 hours a day of training was great and it worked for me, but I've done 6-hour training days that I can tell you right now actually didn't make me any better. So like, if you want to go to the games, doing 6-hour training days straight off the get-go, probably not a good idea. You'll probably get injured and you need to start and build up. The same thing goes. It's a bit of a journey. And I know that's a bit cliche, but it's a bit of a journey to figure out what works for you in that term, training volume, training load, and also what fires you up. I would rather go into a competition really fired up about the block of training I've just done, because I've done more endurance stuff because I enjoy that stuff, and come in 10% less strong, but then know that I've got a killer punch and I'll dominate the endurance event, and I might take a last quarter position in the strength event, but at least I've got something I can remember. I've had a good lead up. I've had a fun time, instead of working on all of my weaknesses and then kind of sucking at everything. Yeah. So I think it's very individual and you can't figure out what type of athlete you are there.
And I guess that's why CrossFitters and hybrids are known as that jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Right. Awesome. Well, guys, I think that's us. Guys, thank you so much for jumping in. Taylor, thanks so much for your time. You've shed some light on a bunch of cool areas that I think people need to know more about. So I really appreciate that. And guys, if you want to, I'll put in the show notes where you can find Taylor, put the Instagram on there, put the Bite Right app on there. So if you guys want to go check out more of what Taylor's doing in her space and what she's doing in the CrossFit space, high rock space, the hybrid space, you can check out the show notes, say hello, send a message, and get on cracking. And it's been a pleasure doing Phyba Performance Podcast episode 35 with Taylor Ryan.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cool.
Sweet.
Good shit.